Chapter 4 The Last Delicacy. It was the night before Natalia, Buck, Titania, Finnigan, and Philomena were to be deployed to the Void Kingdom. And because the Fox Queen Inari knew that it was a real possibility they could die during their deployment, she thought that she should have her servants prepare a final delicacy for them as a symbolic last meal. As for Inari herself, she refrained from eating any delicacies for the course of her 9-month pregnancy, and instead eat what would be most beneficial for the health of the kit growing inside her. But because money was no object to her, she gave everyone else the best food of her palace, even if the others didn't have a refined enough taste to fully enjoy it besides Philomena. And even though Inari didn't say it out loud and mostly concealed what she really felt, Philomena's heart sense could feel Inari's judgmental attitude about the way Natalia and Buck wolfed down the first course of their meal because of how tasty it was. And Philomena felt something in Inari's heart along the lines of, "Do you uncivilized Tanukis even have the basic manners to chew and enjoy quality food? If I had known that, maybe I should have only had them make you burgers and fries like your lowly class kind normally eats. But should I really blame them? They're only Tanukis after all, and who didn't have the gift of civilization until us Kitsunes gave them it as an unmerited gift." Philomena then whispered to Finnigan, "I don't think I've ever met someone such a snob in my life." Finnigan then said, "You don't know the half of it. Another reason I love living in America is just how much snobbery is despised. And in Kitsune society, snobbery is quite common." "Well, let's just not bring that up right now. It's best if we don't get kicked out of the Queen's house for being rude. Plus, we're leaving in the morning anyway, and I like to get good night's sleep on a bed rather than concrete." "Yeah, maybe I should learn to take a hint sometimes and know when to shut up." "Not to sound mean, but you're right. It's important to know when to speak and when not to, especially when you're like most people who don't have heart sense." And as Finnegan tried his best to taste what he was eating, Philomena noticed he didn't touch any of the fancy alcoholic drinks at all, despite knowing he enjoyed quality food and drink. Philomena then asked Finnegan, "Is there a reason you haven't drunken any of your sake yet?" Finnegan then remembered what happened to his older brother during the Long Depression, and was only reminded of how he died. Philomena then could feel it bothered him and said, "I probably shouldn't have asked that." Finnegan then said to Philomena, "It's fine. I still miss a good man in my life who died too young." Philomena's expression then went gentle. "Who was he, and what did he mean to you?" "He was my older brother, who I looked up to and someone who helped me get through the Long Depression. I still remember how he died. A rich Arctic fox kitsune who was drunk ran him over in his expensive car and fled the scene before anyone could do anything about him. And ever since then, I never wanted to have anything to do with alcohol. My family tried to press charges, but that fucker bribed the district attorney and got away with no consequences, while I ended up with a dead brother. It's why I never expect justice in this world, because if you have money and influence, the world bends to your will and everyone else is just an extension. There were reasons beyond just me being young and dumb why I joined the Communist Party against the rich, and why monsters like Hitler and Lenin rose to power and committed crimes against civilization. Without aristocrats who enrich themselves and reject all reason like the French kings and Russian czars, revolutionaries like the Bolsheviks and French peasants would have never gained any legitimacy in the first place, and completely avoided many regimes and reigns of terror and tyrants that are common to revolutions. And it was the tyrants behind the reign of terror of the Communist Party why I turned on them, and helped Inari's army destroy them, because I became a communist seeking action for justice, not the tyranny and reign of terror I ended up getting." Philomena then felt a little concerned after hearing Finnegan start to rant and asked, "And how do you define justice so that I can have some idea why you believe you won't find it in this world?" Finnegan then answered Philomena with a straight face. "Justice is having everything in its proper place and giving it to each person what is their due. This world will never have justice in this life, because this world is full of sin and that takes everything out of its proper place and denies people what is rightly theirs. And if you live in a society that rewards evil and punishes good, you have anti-justice, and that will last until society either kills itself with its own wickedness, or the unjust are put to death and replaced by those who are just. But do you at least believe God is just? I intellectually assent to the fact that God is just, but I do not expect God to serve justice in this life, because God does not force himself on us to do what is good. And for as terrible as this world is, it is this freedom to choose to be evil that makes doing what is good meaningful rather than just something that would be meaningless thanks to it being out of compulsion. I also have no control over whether or not God enacts justice in this life, and I lack the will to power that can force God to do anything, with me being a mere creature. And even if I did not know that God is just, there's nothing I'd be able to do to rightly judge God's action, because God's will to power is absolute, and law over all that exists that my finite nature is beholden to, that absolute law. Therefore, under both the will to power paradigm and classical Christian morality, God's law is absolute. I am also of the opinion that hell is more of a just than life in this world, because in this world the innocent suffer, while the wicked prosper, and in hell there is no one who does not deserve to be there. Then does that mean you believe God will not enact any justice in this world, and that we're all just fated to suffer injustice while the wicked prosper and we all die? Not entirely. There's nothing stopping God from enacting justice if he wants to. But we cannot put all injustice in the hands of God as if we have no agency. After all, each one of us has to choose to be just or unjust, and pick a side and accept the consequences that come with it. The reason I try not to expect justice from God in this life is because I don't want to get my hopes up and hope for something that will possibly never come. As to why God blesses some people in this life and not others, I will never understand. But I don't expect or seek any blessing to make myself more sensitive to when blessings do happen in this life. I only expect to receive the bare minimum for survival, as in my daily bread, and try to live simply, accordingly, knowing it can all be gone in an instant. I'm not even sure if the little good things I do even help people. But I know that God's law orders me to do them, so I do them. Just everything in my life feels like vanity, so what even is there left for me except to fulfill the commandments of God and then die, and be forgotten like everyone else will eventually? It's why I feel much more wisdom in Ecclesiastes and Job than I do Proverbs, even though all three are excellent sources of wisdom. But sometimes I wonder what's the point in doing anything? Well, even if we are forgotten eventually, at least we had some effect in the great chain that goes on. And we're at least bound to be remembered by three persons. So it's not like it's totally gloomy that we'll all be forgotten. God won't forget you or anyone else like normal humans will. And that's a good thing. So it's why I be with God and just enjoy life rather than brood over everything. But I guess that's something that separates us from each other, me and you. You asked what's the point and are implicit nihilist, yet at the same time don't want to be a nihilistic because you fear you might be wrong and know deep inside yourself that nihilism is wrong and can't accept it. And you know that because nihilism, by saying everything has no meaning, refutes itself, by giving itself a meaning. And like St. Thomas Aquinas, whom I remember learning about in school, has some good insight on the matter of why we seek things that are good. Whether we acknowledge it or not, we are seeking God, and only God can satisfy our hearts, and anything other than God can never truly satisfy anyone. Thus anyone seeking to satisfy themselves with anything other than God only finds the nothingness God made the world out of, and becomes a true nihilist, returning to the disorder and chaos in which the world was brought into, being from non-being. Even if you are a Catholic and I'm Orthodox, I don't recognize Thomas Aquinas as a saint in any official manner. I wouldn't rule out the possibility he's part of the saints unknown. If anything, I find Thomas Aquinas more insightful than Seraphim Rose, who, for whatever reason, has a cult of personality surrounding him. But apart from Seraphim Rose's toxic fans, the man himself, from what I've read, was a very holy priest living in that degenerate hellhole called California West Coast. But as a writer, I think Seraphim Rose talks in circles a lot, and while listening to some of his works, like his Orthodox Survival Course, I was constantly thinking, can you just get to the point already? When I was 8 hours in, I didn't get that when my babushka catalyst catechized me in the 2010s on Timothy Ware's The Orthodox Church and other materials I was catechized with. Needless to say, I'm not really a fan of Seraphim Rose and think he should just be left to rest in peace. And I think you gave a better refutation of nihilism in a few sentences than Seraphim Rose did in multiple pages. Thanks, I only had a high school education before getting on with my life. To be honest, I'm convinced the idea that everyone needs to go to college is stupid, as it will just devalue a college education to being an extension of high school. And I can't think of anything apart from doctors, engineers, and tax attorneys that would actually benefit from having a college education. Like, seriously, I work at my parents' bakery and a part-time volunteer healer because of my magical ability, none of which require anything beyond a basic education. Why would anyone need to know how to do calculus or all these engineering principles if you're just going to be loading trailers, driving trains, baking cakes, or farming? It seems like a big waste of time, and I remember hearing from an old Zoomer how so many people had college degrees that they were basically made meaningless, and had tens of thousands of dollars in debt attached with compound interest and basic entry-level jobs requiring college degrees and years of experience while paying minimum wage and no benefits and the possibility of being fired at will. Oh, and then you couldn't default on the debt even if you had good reason to, like having no money, because of bankruptcy and bad circumstances. And it's hearing stories like these that basically reveal to me that the student loan industry in America is basically the spawn of Satan. I'm all too aware of that. When I first arrived in America in the 2010s and went to a Catholic university in the Midwest, even if it was on taxpayer money as part of my job, working with the military industrial complex. And before you ask, it wasn't like I willingly went to this job to produce weapons to kill people so much as the government forced me into it for studying magical abilities or else. But while at the university, I kind of realized just how bad things are for most people. The university presents itself as a bastion of learning and opportunity for growth and holds to Catholic values. But what I really experienced was it being a front for selling false hope to families and greed, while what actually being taught was anti-Catholic, far leftist ideology. I even went to Mass a few times on campus, but rather than receive the reverent liturgy that I experienced in my village in Alaska or read about in my theology courses, it was basically like a high church Protestant service with a feel-good sermon lacking depth. And after a few times of that, I stopped going to Mass and just stayed in my dorm and got some extra sleep Sunday mornings. And this was in spite of the fact that my priest in my Alaska village said I could go to a Catholic church for liturgy if there was no Orthodox church around so long as I didn't take communion. And while Finnigan and Philomena kept yapping up a storm, Inari was listening in on their conversation, taking it in and seeing if there was anything she could learn. And overhearing what Finnigan said about why he did what he did when he was younger, Inari began to understand in a more empathetic way what motivated him to be a communist. And then she thought about herself and her own leadership, and how many other people may have been like Finnigan who did similar things for similar reasons. It also brought to her mind how her own excessive lifestyle bred resentment in her own people, seeing they would have to struggle to make a living while she just had to go live extravagantly off their tax money, while providing very little what citizens did almost everything. She then thought to herself, if my life is causing my citizens to feel this way, I'd rather raise my child with humility like my subjects than have my child be raised in luxury and take on my worst traits. I'd rather my child grow up to be better than me than be a worse copy of myself like my mother tried to do with me. For what I want, prosperity, for all my citizens, and not just myself, like my tyrant mother, which is why I spit on her grave, wanting to be better than her. You never deserved to have the good man who was my father. So I'll be a better wife and mother than you ever were, and actually raise my child rather than treat it like a means to an end. And with Inari's husband Yako being a true Ninetales with a limited clairvoyance, with his ethereal magic, he said to his wife, "Having served your mother, I can understand what you're feeling, and I agree with your sentiment that we should raise our child like your subjects. What do you think of the Reddington village or the Yako tribe?" "I think the Reddington village is a better place to raise our child in peace. I've already asked Vixie if she would be willing to be our child's godmother when it's time to be born, and she said yes. And she lives close to the Reddington village with her husband, who is a good man, with a good family, to help with our child being raised in a good environment. And if it's not too much to ask, I think it's best if we keep it secret from our child that its mother is the empress of this clan until our child becomes of age and matures into a responsible person, and is ready to take on the responsibility of becoming the future heir. Our child is not to know it is a prince or a princess until it becomes of age and is mature enough to handle it responsibly." Yako then kissed his wife and hugged her and said, "That's a very valid concern, knowing we should raise our child to be humble so that it will mature and become a good ruler of our kingdom. And as the tradition of the Yako tribe, everyone, including the children of the patriarch of the Yako tribe, was to begin life at the bottom of the ranks with no favoritism based on family line. And it was done this way to teach us to be humble and not above or below each other, but as we are all brothers and sisters in arms in the Yako tribe." Buck and Natalia then completely stuffed their tanuki bellies with every course the palace chefs put before them, knowing they could just hibernate it off sailing across the ocean. And Inari elegantly finished the last of her plate, signaling the feast was over, and it was time to get some shut-eye. But before Buck and Natalia could return to their rooms, Inari said to them, "This may be the last meal we share together, but hopefully you'll live long enough to share another after my child is born, when you come back. So please, do everyone a favor, and destroy those dark magic artifacts, even if you don't come back. Not that I expect you'd want to come back anyway. The Navy will escort you from my palace in the morning, along with your companions. So this is my farewell to you five. And yes, I do have a spare room for Philomena, so she doesn't have to share a bed with Finnigan. So, good night to you all." Everyone returned to their rooms, with Buck and Natalia easily falling asleep together on a stuffed, full stomach, while Titania fell asleep on her own bed. But neither Philomena nor Finnigan could sleep, with both of them just staring at the ceiling in their rooms while lying on their beds. That was until Philomena decided to get up and knock on Finnegan's door and asked, "Finnigan, are you awake?" Finnegan then opened the door and asked, "What's going on?" "I can't sleep. Neither can I." "You mind if I come in and we can just hang out?" "I don't see why not, so long as you don't do anything creepy while we're alone together." "That won't be a problem. I just want to talk to you." Philomena and Finnegan then sat on the foot of the bed together as Finnegan asked, "So, what is it you want to talk to me about?" "It's the mission we're about to be sent on, and it's keeping me up at night. I don't want to kill anyone, but I know someone is going to die while I'm out there." Finnegan then just let Philomena feel her own emotions and waited for her to calm down before saying, "You are a healer. You don't have to kill anyone." "I hope you're right." And feeling more comfortable having Finnegan with her, she began to doze off and eventually fell asleep while staring at the ceiling on Finnegan's bed. And seeing Philomena doze off also helped him feel tired and fall asleep next to Philomena on his own bed. And when both Philomena and Finnigan woke up next to each other, Philomena said, "Thanks for helping me fall asleep last night. I hope I didn't creep you out or anything. Never mind what I'm saying. You're a guy and probably enjoyed having a pretty girl sleep right next to you." Finnigan then blushed as he couldn't deny Philomena was pretty and good looking. But at the same time, he knew she was teasing him. Philomena then said to him, "No one needs to know we slept in the same bed together. Besides, it's not like we had sex or anything, just passed out talking and staring at the ceiling. Maybe you don't have a problem with it, but I do, and how people would see that. Maybe it's just because we're different species I'm not sexually attracted to you, and neither are you sexually attracted to me. So I felt more comfortable like sharing a bed with my Labrador retriever. And I have a question for you. Do you know what yiff is?" "No, but I get a feeling I'm about to hear something completely disgusting." "Yiff is part of the furry fandom that makes pornography with anthro characters, and I don't want you being associated with that, because I'm pretty anthro myself." Philomena then looked disgusted, asking, who would think of such a thing and actually do that?" "Some degenerates on fur affinity and deviant art. Anyway, get back to your room and dress in some clean clothes before anyone gets suspicious, and prepare for our sortie." Did you know this? Finnigan at university. This was a little nod to some things while attending Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, which is in the Midwestern United States. I had actually gone to Mass a few times at St. John's Cathedral on campus, which was a Novus Ordo parish, and what I noticed was it felt very Protestant, from having been around many Protestants myself living in America. All the hymns were stuff made since the 1980s, unlike the traditional Catholic hymns you would hear in a traditionally minded Catholic parish, whether it be Novus Ordo or traditional Latin Mass. And I knew something wasn't right, because I had been to a Novus Ordo liturgy many times when I was in grade school, which was very reverent, almost to the point of an Orthodox divine liturgy, and looked like what you would expect in a liturgy to look like. And because learning theology was part of the general education, we had covered the Council of Trent, which established the Tridentine Mass as the standard Catholic liturgy, and to not see that as the standard liturgy really said to me that either these Catholics at this particular parish are not really interested in being Catholic and not even following Vatican II, which gets blamed for many things that it didn't actually do, where the only real change it made was to the Catholic liturgy was being that it made the preference for the vernacular over Latin. I also remember some of my professors were closet Marxists and had a fondness for Karl Marx despite being in an upper income bracket. And then there was the real kicker that most of the money was being paid to university was just pocketed and not being used for educational purposes, but for sports teams and executive bonuses, and having the real gall to ask for donations after charging students at least $30,000 a year. And that just left me thinking that Creighton University and other campuses like them are probably ran by a bunch of greedy bastards, and that I was better off going to a state school for a lot less money for the same education and degree that says I can follow instructions.